Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't expected to turn her remote research station into an intergalactic nursery. But then again, she hadn't expected a lot of things about her life on the edges of known space, like how the coffee machine's eye would develop a British accent, or how she'd end up being the go-to expert on predatory alien species medical care. The Helios research station hung in the darkness between stars, its solar arrays glinting like diamond facets in the distant starlight. It was supposed to be a quiet posting, monitoring ecosystem development on newly terraformed worlds, collecting data on xenobiological adaptation patterns, and occasionally treating the odd spacer who'd gotten too friendly with an unknown species. Sarah had chosen it specifically for the solitude it offered, a place where she could focus on her research without the complications of civilization. The universe, as it often did, had other plans. The first warning came as a proximity alert at 300 station time. Sarah was in her lab, analyzing tissue samples from a particularly interesting variant of space-adapted apex predator, when the station's AI pinged her console. "Dr. Chen, we have an incoming vessel. Varjan configuration, warrior class, but they're broadcasting medical distress signals." Sarah straightened, her attention immediately shifting from her microscope to the main display. The Varjans were one of the most feared predatory species in known space. 8 feet of armored chitin and crystalline claws, with a hierarchical society based on hunting prowess. They didn't ask for help. Ever. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a sleek vessel approaching the station. Its hull bore the distinctive iridescent patterns of a high-ranking Varjan clan, but something was wrong. The ship's flight pattern was erratic, almost desperate. "They're requesting immediate docking and medical assistance," the AI reported. The message mentions hatchlings. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Varjan hatchlings were rarely seen by any other species. The warriors were notoriously protective of their young. If they were bringing them here, grant them emergency docking clearance, alert Medical Bay 2, and prep for possible quarantine protocols. The next 20 minutes were a blur of preparation. Sarah had studied Varjan physiology. Of course, it was part of her job, but she'd never actually treated one, let alone their young. She was pulling up every reference she could find when the docking clamps engaged with a resonant thunk that vibrated through the station's structure. The Varjan warriors who emerged from their ship were nothing like the proud, deadly hunters Sarah had read about. Their kitten was dulled with stress, their movements sharp with barely contained panic, and in their arms, Sarah's breath caught. The hatchlings were beautiful, their shells still soft and opalescent, their tiny claws clicking weakly against their carrier's armor. But even at a glance, she could see something was terribly wrong. Their color was off, their movements too slow. "Please," the lead warrior said, mandibles clicking in distress. "Something is killing our young. You are known to understand predator species. Will you help?" Sarah was already moving forward, medical scanner in hand. "Of course. Bring them to Medical Bay 2. Tell me everything you've observed." As they rushed to the medical bay, the warriors explained. It had started gradually: lethargy, loss of appetite, weakening of their natural armor. At first, they thought it was a normal part of growth, but then more hatchlings began showing symptoms. When the first ones began to die, the clan made the unprecedented decision to seek outside help. Sarah worked through the night, running every test she could think of while the warrior parents hovered anxiously nearby. Their presence should have been terrifying. A single swipe of those crystalline claws could tear through the station's bulkheads. But all she could see was their concern, their fear for their children. Dawn cycle was breaking over the station's artificial horizon when her main console chimed with preliminary results. What she saw made her blood run cold. "This isn't natural," she murmured, examining the data. "These patterns, this is engineered. Someone did this deliberately." A low growl rumbled through the medical bay as the warriors processed her words. But before they could respond, another alert sounded. "Dr. Chen," the AI's voice was urgent. "We have 3 more vessels approaching. Different species, all broadcasting similar distress signals. Sarah looked at the screen showing the approaching ships, then at the worried Varjan parents, then at their sick hatchlings. She took a deep breath. "Well," she said, already mentally cataloging what supplies she'd need, "looks like we're going to need more incubators." The Varjan clan leader stepped forward, crystalline claws catching the light. "You would help them too." Sarah met those alien eyes steadily. "They're children. Of course I'll help them." She paused, then added with a small smile, "Though we might need to discuss expanding the medical bay." The warrior's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was learning to recognize as approval. "Perhaps now I understand why humans have such a reputation among predator species. You fear so little when protecting the young." Sarah turned back to her console, already preparing for the new arrivals. "Oh, I fear plenty. I'm just more afraid of what happens if no one helps." She gestured to the readings on her screen. "Besides, someone out there is targeting predator species children. That makes it my problem." As she worked, she could hear the station's docking systems engaging again, preparing to receive more desperate parents and sick young. The research station's quiet days were definitely over, but as she watched the Varjan warriors gently tending to their hatchlings, using their deadly claws with impossible delicacy to adjust medical sensors, Sarah couldn't bring herself to mind. Sometimes the best research came from unexpected circumstances, and sometimes, she was learning, the deadliest predators made the most dedicated parents. The universe might have other plans for her quiet research station, but maybe those plans were better than her own. After all, someone had to stand up for these children, even if they came with claws and armor. She just hoped the coffee machine's eye was up for the challenge of learning to make drinks for multiple species. 3 days into what Station AI had dubbed Operation Nursery, Sarah found herself mediating a territorial dispute between a Varjan warrior and a Crethan pack mother over optimal basking spots for their respective offspring. The fact that she could now casually stand between two of the galaxy's most lethal predator species without flinching probably said something about how much her life had changed. The crystalline radiation from this viewport is essential for proper shell development. The Varjan warrior, whom Sarah had mentally nicknamed Blue due to his iridescent markings, clicked his mandibles in agitation. The Crethan, a massive feathered serpentine creature who'd introduced herself as Sis, coiled protectively around her feverish cubs. "And the solar wavelengths are critical for maintaining my children's core temperature. We were here first." Sarah rubbed her temples, grateful for the universal translator handling the linguistic gymnastics. "The viewport is 12 meters long. Surely we can." She was interrupted by an urgent beep from her medical scanner. One of the Nexeri spawn's vital signs was dropping. Without hesitation, both Blue and Sis moved aside, making way as Sarah rushed past. Their dispute was instantly forgotten in the face of another child's distress. That was the thing about predator species that had surprised Sarah most. Their fierce territoriality disappeared completely when it came to protecting young, even those of other species. She'd watched Varjan warriors use their crystalline claws with surgical precision to help adjust medical equipment for tiny Crethan cubs, while Nexeri hunters shared their specialized healing secretions with anyone who needed them. The medical bay had been expanded into 3 additional modules, each carefully climate-controlled for different species needs. The station hummed with the sound of environmental systems working overtime, mixing atmospheres and maintaining the delicate balance needed to keep everyone alive and healing. Sarah reached the Nexeri spawn's incubator just as its parent, a silent hunter named Shadow and Starlight, appeared at her side. Together, they worked to stabilize the small creature's life signs, Sarah directing while Shadow and Starlight made adjustments with appendages evolved for stalking prey, but now dedicated to healing. There, Sarah sighed as the reading stabilized. The enzyme treatment is working, but it's fighting against whatever's attacking their immune systems. Shadow and Starlight's chromatophores rippled with concern. "You believe you know what causes this." "I'm getting closer." Sarah pulled up her latest analysis on the nearest screen. The pathogen is artificial, that much we know. But it's not just attacking one species. It's adaptive, changing to target different genetic markers. Someone engineered this to specifically harm predator species young. A low rumble of anger went through the medical bay. Sarah had learned to recognize the different ways each species expressed rage. The click of Vargian mandibles, the bristling of Crethan feathers, the deep infrared patterns of angry Nexari. The question is why? Sarah continued, already moving to check on her other patients. And more importantly, how to stop it. The enzyme treatments are helping manage symptoms. But we need a cure. She reached the central monitoring station, where her small human medical team worked alongside alien parents to track every child's progress. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her best xenobiologist, looked up from where she was showing a junior Vargian warrior how to calibrate monitoring equipment. The latest blood work shows some promise, Yuki reported. The Crethan cubs are responding well to the modified antivirals. If we can combine that with the natural resistance we're seeing in the Nexari. Sarah nodded, already seeing where this was going. We might be able to synthesize a broader treatment. Good thinking. Get samples from all recovering patients. Look for common factors. A soft chime announced another ship's arrival. They'd been coming steadily. Word had spread quickly through predator species networks about the human station that would help their young. Sarah checked the incoming data and felt her heart sink. Corvathi Dreadnought, she announced to the bay at large. They're reporting similar symptoms in their brood. The Corvathi were notorious isolationists, their crystal ship fleets rarely seen in civilized space. For them to seek help. How bad has this gotten? Yuki wondered aloud. Bad enough that the most dangerous species in known space are trusting humans with their children, Sarah replied, already heading for the docking bay. We need to solve this fast. She paused as she passed the viewport where Blue and Sis had been arguing. They'd apparently reached a compromise. Their young were now sharing the space, Vargian hatchlings and Crethan cubs, carefully arranged to catch different wavelengths of light. More surprisingly, both parents were cooperatively adjusting the positioning of a solar shield to optimize exposure for all the children. Doctor, Blue called as she passed. We have been discussing. Among our species, hunting in packs is considered primitive. His mandibles clicked in what Sarah now recognized as embarrassment. But perhaps, in this situation, cooperation has advantages. Sis's feathers rippled in agreement. Our young grow stronger together. Different strengths, different methods of healing. Like the enzyme treatments, Sarah realized. Each species' natural defenses, working together. She quickly tapped notes into her pad. You might be onto something there. Keep watching them. Record any interactions that seem to improve their condition. As she hurried to meet the Corvathi, Sarah felt a surge of hope. The station was overcrowded, its resources stretched thin, and she hadn't slept properly in days. But something extraordinary was happening here. Species that had evolved to fear and fight each other were learning to cooperate, united by the most fundamental instinct of all, protecting their young. And maybe, just maybe, that cooperation would help them find a cure. She just hoped they'd figure it out before whoever engineered this disease realized their targets had found common ground. Because Sarah had a feeling that when predator species hunted as a pack, with humans coordinating their efforts, nothing in the galaxy would be able to stand against them, especially not when they were fighting for their children. The breakthrough came at 200 station time, when most of the young were sleeping and their parents had settled into the quiet watchfulness that seemed universal among predator species. Sarah was in her lab, reviewing genetic data for the 1000th time, when her computer flagged a pattern she'd missed. That can't be right, she muttered, enhancing the display. Cross-reference with corporate patent databases. The results made her sit up straight, suddenly wide awake despite having been on her feet for 20 hours. She quickly opened a secure channel to her second-in-command. Yuki, I need you in the main lab. Now. By the time Yuki arrived, Sarah had filled 3 holographic displays with data. The Japanese xenobiologist, took one look at the screens and swore softly. Is that what I think it is? Gene markers from Stellaris Pharmaceuticals' failed terraforming initiative. Sarah confirmed grimly. Look at the base pairs. They're almost identical to the pathogen attacking our patients. Yuki moved closer to the displays, her expression darkening as she absorbed the implications. But Stellaris went bankrupt 5 years ago after their ecosystem modification projects failed. They couldn't stabilize their engineered environments because predator species kept moving in and disrupting their carefully balanced systems. Sarah finished. Natural apex predators adapting to their artificial environments faster than they could control. It cost them billions. And now someone's using their research to target predator species young. Yuki's voice was hard. But who would have access to their old data? And why now? Before Sarah could respond, the station's AI interrupted. Dr. Chen, you have an incoming transmission from the Galactic Trade Council. They're requesting an update on the situation. Sarah and Yuki exchanged looks. The council had been surprisingly hands-off about the station's transformation into an emergency medical facility, but they'd known that wouldn't last forever. Put them through to my office, Sarah sighed. And wake Dr. Martinez. We'll need his diplomatic expertise for this. The council representative was a Trilaxian, their crystalline form shimming with official colors. Dr. Chen, we're concerned about the concentration of predator species at your facility. The potential for conflict is minimal, Sarah interrupted smoothly. In fact, we're seeing unprecedented cooperation between species. She transmitted carefully selected footage of parents working together to care for each other's young. The Trilaxian's crystals flickered in what might have been surprise. Nevertheless, certain parties have expressed concern about the research you're conducting. Perhaps if you shared your data with more established facilities, like NovaGen Corporation, Sarah asked quietly, watching the representative's reaction. Interesting that you'd suggest them, considering they bought most of Stellaris Pharmaceuticals' assets after their bankruptcy. The subtle shift in the Trilaxian's crystal patterns told her she'd hit a nerve. I'm not sure I understand the relevance. I think you do. Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Just as I think you understand exactly why predator species young are being targeted with a modified version of Stellaris's old terraforming technology. She leaned forward, letting her anger show. Someone's trying to eliminate apex predator species by attacking their children. They're using modified corporate biotech to do it. And now that we're close to a cure, suddenly the council is interested in transferring our research. The Trilaxian's form stiffened. These are serious accusations, Doctor. Without proof. A new voice interrupted, the deep resonant tones of the Corvathi brood queen. We have proof. Sarah turned to see the massive crystalline form of the Corvathi leader in her doorway, surrounded by representatives of every predator species on the station. The Trilaxian's colors shifted to alarm. While you distracted them with bureaucracy, the brood queen continued. Our ships traced the origin of the pathogen. Interesting how many shipments led back to NovaGen facilities. We are hunters, Blue added, stepping forward. His warrior's armor gleamed under the office lights. Did you think we would not seek our prey? The Trilaxian's form was cycling through colors rapidly now. The council will need to verify. The council will do nothing. A new voice cut in. A human voice. Sarah turned to see Admiral Chen, her mother, appearing on a separate comm channel. Because the Earth Federation is already launching a full investigation into NovaGen's activities, with the full cooperation of the predator species alliances. Sarah stared at her mother in surprise. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. Did you think I wouldn't keep an eye on my daughter's station? Especially when she started taking in the galaxy's most dangerous children. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Federation investigators descended on NovaGen facilities across 3 sectors. The companies attempt to eliminate competition for their terraforming projects by weakening predator species, making them too focused on protecting their young to challenge corporate expansion, was exposed. But Sarah barely paid attention to the political fallout. She was too busy in her lab, working with a team of predator species scientists, using their newfound understanding of the pathogen's origin to develop a cure. It's elegant in a horrible way, she explained to the assembled parents later. They used your own strengths against you, your territorial instincts, your protectiveness of your young. They never expected you to overcome those instincts and work together. They understood predators, Sis hissed softly, her feathers rippling. But they did not understand parents. Or humans, Blue added, mandibles clicking in what Sarah now knew was amusement. Who else would look at the galaxy's deadliest species and think, yes, I will help their children? Sarah smiled, watching through the medical bay window as the first group of treated youngsters played together. Vargan hatchlings stalking playfully after Crethan cubs, while Nexeri spawn practiced their camouflage among the medical equipment. Maybe that's humanity's real strength, she mused. Not that we're unafraid, but that we choose to help anyway. The station's proximity alert chimed again. More ships arriving, more parents seeking help. But now they had a cure, and more importantly, they had something unprecedented. A coalition of the galaxy's most dangerous species, united in purpose. Sarah straightened her lab coat and headed for the docking bay. They had work to do, and not just treating the sick. Someone had tried to eliminate predator species by exploiting their greatest weakness, their children. Instead, they'd given them a reason to work together, with humanity as their unlikely allies. The galaxy would never be the same, and Sarah had a feeling that was exactly what it needed. Sarah stood in the observation dome of Helios Station, watching the unusual fleet assembled outside. Korvathi crystal ships hung in formation alongside Vargan ore vessels and Crethan living craft, while Nexeri shadow hunters slipped between them like liquid darkness. A year ago, this combination would have meant war. Today, they were working together to distribute the cure across known space. The first reports are coming in from the Vargan colonies, Yuki reported, joining her at the window. 97% success rate. The hatchlings are recovering faster than we predicted. Sarah nodded, trying to hide her exhaustion. They'd worked around the clock to perfect the treatment, combining the natural resistances of different species with modified human immune responses. The result was something entirely new, a cure that adapted to each species while strengthening their natural defenses. The Crethan cubs, she asked, running their parents ragged. Yuki smiled. Sis says they're already back to hunting practice. Their coordination is actually better than before, probably from all the time spent with other species young during treatment. That had been an unexpected side effect of their emergency nursery. The young of different species had learned from each other, developing hybrid hunting styles and social behaviors that their parents found both alarming and impressive. Sarah had already received requests from 3 different xenobiologists asking to study the phenomenon. The station's AI interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Chen, the council meeting is ready to begin. Sarah straightened her uniform and headed for the conference room. The sight that greeted her still took some getting used to. Representatives of every major predator species gathered around one table, with human diplomats and scientists interspersed among them. The distribution of the cure is proceeding as planned. Admiral Chen began, her hologram flickering slightly at the center of the table. But we need to discuss long-term prevention. Nova Gen's actions have exposed a vulnerability none of us can ignore. They believed they could defeat us by targeting our young. The Korvathi Brood Queen's crystalline form resonated with controlled anger. They failed to understand that this would only unite us. Which raises an interesting question. Blue clicked, his warrior's armor gleaming. What do we do with this unity now that we have it? Sarah cleared her throat. Actually, I have a proposal about that. She activated the room's holographic display, showing plans she'd been working on. What happened here wasn't just about finding a cure. We proved something that most thought impossible, that different predator species can not only coexist but thrive together, especially when it comes to raising young. The display shifted, showing modified station schematics. I propose we make this permanent. Not just an emergency medical facility, but a true interspecies center for healing and learning. A place where our young can grow together, where we can combine our knowledge and strengths. The room erupted in discussion, different species' voices mixing in a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and subsonic rumbles. Sarah waited, watching the reactions. To her surprise, it was Shadow and Starlight who spoke first. The Nexari Clutch Congress has already voted to support such an initiative. The hunters' chromatophores rippled with determination. Our spawn are stronger for their time here. They learn new ways of thinking, new ways of hunting. This benefits all. The Varsian hierarchies agree. Blue added, our hatchlings have developed skills we never considered possible. And his mandibles clicked in what Sarah now recognized as thoughtful hesitation. Perhaps there are advantages to cooperation that we had not previously valued. One by one, the representatives voiced their support. Even the Corvithi, traditionally the most isolated of the predator species, agreed that the benefits outweighed their usual caution. Then it settled. Admiral Chen's hologram smiled. The Earth Federation will provide additional resources and personnel. This station will become the first interspecies medical and educational center. With your daughter in charge. The Crethan representative's feathers rippled with amusement. Actually, Sarah interjected, I was thinking more of a council, with representatives from all species. We've learned that our different perspectives are our greatest strength. She gestured to the window, where they could see young of different species still playing together in the medical bay. Look at them. They don't see enemies or competitors. They see friends, playmates, fellow hunters. Maybe it's time we learned from their example. Humans, Blue clicked, managing to make the word sound both exasperated and fond. Always thinking you can make family out of predators. Haven't we? Sarah challenged gently. What else do you call a group that comes together to protect their young, that shares knowledge and resources, that fights to defend each other? The room fell silent as her words sank in. Outside, a Varsian hatchling helped a smaller Nexari spawn climb onto a medical bed, their natural hunting instincts transformed into cooperation. Very well. The Corvithi Brood Queen's crystals chimed with finality. Let it be known that from this day forward, this place stands as a symbol of our new unity. A reminder that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from hunting alone, but from hunting together. Sarah looked around the room at these beings that most of the galaxy feared, at her strange, deadly, wonderful family, and smiled. They had created something unprecedented here, born from crisis but built to last. The galaxy's most dangerous species had learned to trust humans with their young. But more importantly, they had learned to trust each other. And that, she suspected, would change everything. 5 years after what became known as the Novagen crisis, Sarah stood in the newly completed observation deck of the Interspecies Medical and Educational Center, still called Helios Station by most of its residents. The facility had grown exponentially, with new modules spiraling out from the original research station like the arms of a galaxy. Below her, in the main atrium, young of a dozen different predator species participated in what the staff had dubbed integrated hunting practices, essentially a highly sophisticated game of hide-and-seek that combined different species' natural abilities. She watched as a Varsian hatchling, now nearly fully grown, helped position smaller Crethan cubs for an ambush of a Nexari adolescent who was clearly pretending not to notice their somewhat obvious preparations. They're getting better at working together, Yuki observed, joining her at the window. The latest research shows that groups trained here have a 40% higher success rate in their adult hunting trials. Better at hunting, better at diplomacy, better at pretty much everything, Sarah agreed. Turns out early exposure to different species creates more adaptable adults. Who would have thought? You did, a familiar clicking voice interrupted. Sarah turned to see Blue approaching, his warrior's armor now bearing the additional markings of a diplomatic rank. That's why they're calling it the Chen Doctrine now, the theory that predator species benefit from cooperative early development. Sarah groaned. I wish they wouldn't call it that. I just did what anyone would have done. Ah yes, Blue's mandibles clicked in amusement. Anyone would have. The observation deck filled as more station residents arrived to watch the returning ships. Sarah saw Dr. Martins deep in discussion with a Crethan medical researcher, while her mother's hologram appeared briefly to check on the proceedings. The Admiral had become a strong advocate for interspecies cooperation, though Sarah suspected that had more to do with her new grandchild-like relationship with many of the station's young residents than any political conviction. Administrator Chen, the station AI, interrupted. The Galactic Council representatives have arrived for the graduation ceremony. Sarah straightened her uniform. 5 years ago, she'd been a xenobiologist running a quiet research station. Now she was heading an institution that was reshaping galactic society. The council had been skeptical at first, but the results were undeniable. Species that had been traditional enemies for millennia were now working together, their young growing up as friends rather than future foes. Tell them I'll be right there, she replied. Just need to check on something first. She made her way down to the atrium, where the hide-and-seek game had evolved into what appeared to be a complex tactical exercise involving all three species' natural hunting methods. The young ones paused their game to greet her, some with clicks, others with subtle color changes or feather displays, but all with the easy familiarity of family. A small Vargian hatchling, barely old enough to walk, wobbled over to her on unsteady legs. Sarah knelt down, letting the little one climb into her lap with practiced ease. Around her, no one even blinked at the sight of one of the galaxy's deadliest predators cuddling up to a human like a sleepy kitten. This is your legacy, Blue said quietly, watching the scene. Not just saving our young during the crisis, but showing us that strength comes in many forms. That sometimes the fiercest predators need to learn how to be gentle, and sometimes the gentlest beings need to learn how to be fierce. Sarah stroked the hatchling's soft scales, smiling as it made the clicking purr that all contented Vargian young seemed to share. We just showed you what humanity learned long ago, that raising children takes all kinds. Sometimes the best family is the one you build yourself, even if it includes beings that most of the galaxy considers monsters. To be fair, Shadow and Starlight's colors rippled with amusement. Most of the galaxy still thinks humans are slightly insane for what you do here. Maybe we are, Sarah agreed, carefully passing the sleepy hatchling back to its parent. But it's the kind of insanity that makes the galaxy a better place. Now come on, we have a graduation to attend, and I hear the Nexary students have prepared quite a demonstration. As they headed to the ceremony, Sarah looked back at the atrium one last time. Young predators of various species played and learned together, while their parents, once mortal enemies, watched over them as one unified group. Humans moved among them easily, accepted and trusted with their most precious children. The Novagen crisis had tried to use these species' children as a weakness to exploit. Instead, it had revealed their greatest strength, the ability to overcome ancient instincts and fears for the sake of their young. And in doing so, they had created something unprecedented, a future where the galaxy's deadliest predators worked together, their natural hunting instincts turned to exploration and discovery rather than war. All because humans had looked at the most dangerous beings in known space and thought, those children need help. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the craziest ideas turned out to be the best ones.